Anger is the second most powerful fuel in the world. The most powerful is inner peace. You were always taught as a boy to not show your emotions, to not be affectionate with other men. And so I was always conditioned to be more aggressive and be less loving. I didn't know how to express my emotions. So I'd play sports and I'd still want to fight. I wanted to destroy people. I got in this fight on a basketball court and I'm just like washing the blood off my knuckles. I'm a 30-year-old man getting in a street fight. What is wrong with me? That was a big wake-up call. And then for whatever reason, that moment flashed in my mind about how I was sexually abused when I was 5 by a man that I didn't know. And when I started to open up about this, everything changed. It gave me a sense of peace and freedom that I never felt before. It's become more of a mission and a duty to open up about the shame, the insecurity. And I said, I'm gonna create the school I wish I would have attended growing up. So I want to call this the School of Greatness. For years, I was just interviewing people from all walks of life because I was on a journey to discover who was I.
What is the mission? What does School of Greatness or Lewis Howes look like 10 years from now?
To impact 100 million people a week. We all go through different challenges and obstacles in our life. We need to face these challenges. They're here to teach us something about ourselves and why we're here. So start accepting yourself, start letting go of the past, and move forward in a beautiful way.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... You might know Lewis Howes for his massively successful podcast, The School of Greatness, a book by the same name, and his other book called The Mask of Masculinity. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And Lewis went really deep with me right in the beginning of this episode and talked about the sexual abuse he suffered when he was 5 years old from a babysitter. And this abuse kind of lay dormant in his life up until recently, when he had a moment of rage on a basketball court and had to look himself in the mirror and say, who am I? Why do I have all this anger? Why can't I sleep? What's going on? And he really did a lot of work on himself and had to uncover something that he says he's now grateful for, and that's this sexual abuse that happened. And I really appreciate Lewis talking about this. You know, he's a successful guy, a good-looking guy, a guy that doesn't need to talk about this stuff, but he thinks it's important for his own journey, and so we all can embrace these aspects of ourselves, and I really appreciate him doing that, and I really appreciate Lewis, and I know you're going to enjoy all aspects of this show. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Lewis Howes, the former pro athlete turned entrepreneur, author, and broadcaster. Your podcast, The School of Greatness, has over 100 million downloads with guests like Tony Robbins, Kobe Bryant, David Goggins, and Terry Crews. You're the author of 2 books, the New York Times bestseller, The School of Greatness, and your most recent, The Mask of Masculinity. Lewis, welcome to London Real.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it, man.
Great having you here. You know, I was thinking right before you got here that you and I have probably shared the lives of more key people of influence, you know, than anyone I've ever met. You know, we've really shared space with like all these kind of great,
powerful people.
Yeah. And that's like really interesting. And then I love to talk about that. First of all, how does London feel for you? You're coming from kind of the West Hollywood vibe. What's this place like?
It feels cool. I used to date a girl in London actually in 2010. I was living in Columbus, Ohio in a small apartment for $495 a month. And I was dating this girl who I met at a blogging conference actually, who was a part of like a tech startup company. She was a New Zealander that had moved to London. And so I would come here for like 2 weeks at a time. Okay. It was in Stockwell, which I think isn't the best part of town.
Yeah.
But maybe it's better now. But I would stay in this little apartment with her with 3 roommates, and I would kind of adventure through town. So it's cool to be back.
Okay.
I've been back for the Olympics as well, but it's always interesting. I feel like I've found a right time because the sun is out.
Right.
So it feels good.
Okay, but the weather in California has sold you.
It's amazing. You're from there. You know what
I'm
it's like.
from there.
So it's amazing. But I lived in New York City for a year and a half back in 2011, and I fell in love. And this reminds me of New York a lot, especially right here.
Yeah.
Like the grungy East Village feeling. So I love this.
Yeah, this right around here has kind of the East Village vibe.
Yeah.
It's actually really close to Financial District. It's kind of the center of tech because rents used to be low. It's still got some graffiti, but it's changing
I like
as well.
that.
And what about New York? Why didn't you stay there?
I moved to New York for a dream that was to learn U.S. Handball. I saw handball in the Olympics in 2008. I just got done playing professional football, and my dream was kind of crushed being an athlete. That was my identity.
Right.
And I saw handball. For those that don't know what it is, it's like water polo on land. And I saw this, and I was just like, where's this sport been my whole life? I was designed to play this sport. The typical build, the strength, the speed, it was like my type of athleticism. And there was no professional league in the United States, and there still isn't now, but there were club teams around the country. And so I started researching, and I found that New York City had the national championship club team.
Okay.
And I said, I gotta go play with the best if I wanna be the best. So I moved to New York to go learn this sport, to try to make the USA handball team, to try to go to the Olympics. And I was there for a year and a half, and then I moved to LA for a girl that didn't work out. So
Wow. And your time in New York was good?
it was amazing. I felt like my life was blowing up in a positive way.
Okay.
Everything was working. My business was thriving. I was meeting powerful people, inspiring people. I was getting healthier. Everything was getting better. And then I moved to LA, and everything crashed really fast.
Interesting.
The day I landed, the girl who wanted me to come out there and be in a relationship in the same city, because she was in LA, we were doing long distance, she broke up with me the day I landed.
Wow.
I didn't have a place to live yet. I got rid of my lease in New York. I just had a couple bags and my laptop and a guitar. And I was like, I told myself I would never move for a girl, and this was the reason why. But I said, I'm gonna try to figure this out. Let's try to figure out this relationship. Let me not try to run away from this and go back. And the next 6 to 7 months was really challenging, up and down. It was kind of like my ayahuasca experience. Okay. Everything bad in my life happened. I went through this very emotional breakup in this relationship that was just kind of up and down for 6 months. I went through a business partnership breakup, which I think you might have gone through a partnership breakup back in the day. Yeah. And that was really tough because we were building this multi-million-dollar business, but then our visions started to go in different ways, and our egos clashed. And then I was getting in a lot of just arguments and fights with everyone. It was kind of like I was looking to pick a fight. You know, like when you used to walk into a bar, you got mad, you just wanted to bump into someone because you were looking to pick a fight. I was doing that in all of my life. And so I got into a couple fights playing basketball, and I remember just saying, like, what is wrong with me? You know, why am I so aggressive? Why am I so angry? Why is the common denominator me in every situation in my life that things aren't going well?
And you could see that, though. A lot of men don't see that.
No, I didn't see it for a while until I got in this fight on a basketball court. And it was a really scary moment for me because I didn't realize how strong I actually was. When I kind of let go of everything and got into a fight, it was a dark place.
And you didn't have a history of fighting.
I got in one fight when I was 13,
okay,
you know, with some other teenager, but that was my two only fights.
And
I was able to get this out in football. You know, I was able to legally destroy people.
Right, because you grab them and throw them to the ground and you hit them hard.
Body slam people, headbutt them as hard as you want to, full speed tackle, whatever you need to. Right. And I got all my aggression out for 2 hours a day in practice. So when I had no more football and when everything was going against me, I didn't know how to express my emotions. I didn't know how to communicate them in a healthier version. I didn't know how to get it out. So I'd play sports and I'd still want to fight. And
this pickup game happened.
This pickup game
near
happened.
You, and you're being physically, you play physical anyways.
Play very physical. I was playing against a bigger guy. So it was 5-on-5 street ball. I was playing against a bigger guy that I'd never met before. He was older than me, bigger than me, and it was getting it was a tie game. Both teams were tie game.
And for people that aren't from America, also on the West Coast, there's a lot of smack talking in pickup street basketball.
All it is you suck, your mom this, you're horrible, you're weak, you're soft, everything.
Right.
So if you're already triggered emotionally, and like I was at the time, I took everything personally. Everything was an attack against my life. It didn't matter if they like elbowed me a little bit, said something, I wanted to destroy people. That's the place I was at in my life. And we were both fouling each other pretty hard. You know, we're playing down in the pivot position, we were both fouling each other hard, but it was okay. We were both fouling each other and it was going back and forth, it was a tight game. We were both talking smack, but it got down to the last point. And I fouled him pretty hard when he was going up for a layup, so he didn't score to win the game. And he just snapped and he headbutted me.
Headbutted you?
He headbutted me.
That's no joke.
So this wasn't like a foul, this was, he turned around and straight up headbutted me.
Like in the nose, in the head?
Right in the head.
Oh.
And I remember just saying, it was just like everything in my life that I was frustrated about just came in a moment. And I just went like Incredible Hulk, just like, wah, and just started pounding this guy, UFC style, on the ground, on the court, blood everywhere. And it was just like the most adrenaline I've ever felt. I was so angry and I just unleashed it on this moment. And luckily my friend was playing with on my team. He grabbed me and pulled us apart pretty quickly so it didn't get too crazy. And I remember being so angry in that moment. And he looked at me and he goes, Lewis, you need to leave. Because the police station is right across the street. And as I go back to my home, I remember thinking to myself, like, what is wrong with me? I looked myself in the mirror. I'm shaking looking in the mirror at myself because I don't recognize who I am. You know, my knuckles are bloody and I'm just like washing the blood off my knuckles. And like, I'm a 30-year-old man getting in a street fight, playing pickup basketball. There's nothing at stake here. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be enjoyable on a Wednesday night, and I'm getting upset over stupid little things. And I was getting upset at everything in my life. Yet I was making millions. I had all these accomplishments and awards. You know, people wanted to be my friend. All these things were happening on the outside that looked really good, but on the inside I was suffering and felt so alone. And I didn't know why. And afterwards, my friend who broke up the fight, he talked to me and he said, I don't want to play basketball with you again, and I don't want to hang out with you anymore. And this is a friend of mine for over a decade that I played college football with, who is, you know, part of my life in a big way. And when my best friend says, I don't want to be your friend anymore, that was a big wake-up call. Yeah. Like, I could lose all the money and all these other things, but when your closest friend says, I don't like the person you're becoming, it was like, whoa, I need to change. And it was huge for me. He really stood for me by saying that. Yeah. And
one of the best gifts he could give you was telling you that.
Yeah, it was amazing.
The School of Greatness hadn't started yet. Or just a little bit.
No, it hadn't started yet.
So my question is, what do you do with all that info?
So I remember saying, okay, I need to look within. Like, I need to look within and see what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. I just thought this was who I was. I thought I was an aggressive person. I thought people didn't understand me, and this is who I was. So I started to reach out to all the therapist friends I knew, asking for people who I should talk to. I started going to Tony Robbins events and other emotional intelligence workshops. I was like, I'm willing to try anything. And I tried it all. I didn't do ayahuasca, but I tried a lot of stuff.
Everything but.
Everything but drugs, right?
Okay.
And there was one workshop I went to where it was a 5-day experience, full days, 10, 12-hour days. And it was essentially a small group, about 50 people. And the first half of the workshop, the facilitator was having us address everything from our past. Like all the things that frustrated us, that we defined as like a frustrating moment, the stories we told ourselves. So we would address things about our parents. It was a lot of role playing, a lot of exercises, games to kind of reenact your past so that you could be aware of how you showed up and how it affected you. So it was a lot of a realization for that. And we went pretty deep on everything. You know, we went there. And about the halfway mark of this 5-day workshop, the facilitator says, okay, we've addressed everything from your past, and now we're gonna get clear on what you want for your future, for your relationships, your finances, your career, how you want your life to be moving forward. We're going to let go of the old and create the new. And I said, great. And he said, but if anyone has anything to share that they have not yet shared yet, now is the moment because we're moving forward. And so I'm thinking to myself, I talked about, my parents going through their divorce and always being in a toxic relationship and facing that as a kid and what that was like. But most of the room had, parents were divorced as well. I talked about my brother, how he was in prison for 4.5 years for selling drugs to an undercover cop when I was 8 years old. And I wasn't allowed to have friends during that time for 4 years and how that affected me. I talked about being in the special needs classes, having a 2nd grade reading level in 8th grade and being picked on at school the whole time. I talked about all these things, breakups that I went through and all this stuff. And then for whatever reason, that moment flashed in my mind of something that happened when I was a kid that I've never told anyone. And I just said, why have I never talked about this? Why is this haunting me my whole life, but no one's ever heard about it? And I just think it was because the moment, and I was willing to do the work and discover what was going on with me, that I was like, I just need to get this out. So I stood up in front of everyone. I remember I couldn't look anyone in the eyes. So I just stand up and I'm staring down at the ground the whole time because I'm so ashamed of what I'm about to say. And I look down at the carpet and I, for the first time, open up and tell the story about how I was sexually abused when I was 5 by a man that I didn't know. And I remember just explaining everything, the details from the way the room looked, to the smell, the taste, the experience, the feel, everything. I just shared it all. And it was 25 years after the event happened. And I remember walking back to my chair, and right when I sat down, it was just like I erupted with tears. I couldn't control the feeling, the emotion. I was bursting. It was like I was just howling. Thankfully, there was like 2 women on each side of me that were just like, they were hugging me and they were crying. Everyone was kind of like in shock because I don't think they'd really seen a guy look like me talk about being sexually abused. For those who aren't here in person, I'm 6'4", I'm a big athlete looking guy. And
you look like the high school quarterback.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And I look, I've never seen other people open about this on TV or on social media. I've never seen other men who were tall, straight men, athletic guys, open up about these things. Yeah. And so I just felt my whole life that I was the only one. No one ever talked about it. So it must be only me. So there must be something wrong with me. So I was really ashamed and felt like I was always being abused. I didn't know that was one of the main reasons until I started to open up and go through it all. But I think it's why in every relationship, I felt like I needed to be right. I needed to win every argument. In every sports game, I had to win at all costs. And if I lost, I was the worst loser in the world. It was like an attack on my identity. Everything was a personal attack against me. That's what I felt. And when I started to open up about this, everything changed. Everything started to change because it gave me a sense of peace and freedom that I never felt before. I used to always be up at night, laying in bed for hours. And I didn't know why. I just felt like, I guess I can't sleep. And it wasn't until after I started to really process these emotions and start to heal from the trauma, it's like I can go to bed in a few minutes. And I just have a sense of inner peace that I've never felt before. And it's been an incredible journey in the last 5.5, almost 6 years now, once I started to share the darkest secrets that I didn't want anyone to know because I was ashamed of. And once I started to go through it and address it and talk about it with every one of my family members and every one of my friends, that's when I started to heal. And I remember telling my friends and being really afraid of what they were going to think about me. Like they weren't going to love me anymore. They weren't going to accept me. And one by one, I told my family, and one by one, I told my friends, and it's like people trusted me even more. They loved me even more. And I always felt like, man, it's so crazy because you were always taught as a boy, at least in America, to not show your emotions, to not be affectionate with other men, to not put your arm around a man. Otherwise, you're looked at as gay or weak or soft or whatever word they want to use. And so I was always conditioned to be more aggressive and be less loving, when all I wanted to do was be more loving all the time. And it's been a beautiful journey. And I remember being very scared before I would talk about it with friends. and start kind of like my heart would pump. I was like trembling and just very nervous and insecure before I would tell them. But I knew I needed to tell them. And eventually my friends were like, you should, so now my podcast has come out. It's been out for about 5 or 6 months during this process of discovery and everything happening. And my friends go, you should open up about this on your podcast. And I go, there's no freaking way I'm gonna tell the world about, these experiences. Like, my family has to love me, my friends hopefully accept me. The world, that's a scary subject.
Isn't that weird? Because you haven't met the world.
I know, but it's crazy. And I was like, well, this ruins my business, my reputation. I was so worried about what people think about me, the opinions of other people. And a few months go by, and I realized, like, because I'm scared, I need to do this. Because I'm terrified of what people are to think, that's why I need to do it even more. And it became a mission and a duty of mine. And it sounds like this is something for your documentary as well, that it's become more of a mission and a duty to open up about the stuff that you went through almost 20 years ago that you never shared with anyone, the shame, the insecurity. And I remember recording an episode. The episode was actually 5 years ago. I'm in the 5-year anniversary next week. And I opened up about it, and it takes me about 3 months to publish this, because I'm still so nervous. I record it, I wait. And I remember publishing it, finally feeling like, okay, I'm ready. I publish it at like 10 o'clock at night. I send out one tweet. And I wake up the next morning with hundreds of messages from men sending me essays about all their sexual abuse experiences. And I was just blown away that it's happened to so many men.
Right. It's less frequent with men, but men don't have any forum to talk about it.
Zero forum to talk about it. Now there's some places you can talk about it, rain.com, 1in6.org. 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused. I think it's least in America.
Compared to 1 in 4 women.
1 in 4 women.
Okay.
And I think it's just a topic that people don't talk about because there's so much shame, especially with men.
Yeah, it's a lot of baggage.
So much baggage, so much shame. And how do you talk about it? When I was 5, it wasn't like I really knew what was happening. And it wasn't like you go up to your parents and say, you don't have these intelligent conversations as a 5-year-old. I just knew something really weird happened, and it affected me. And I didn't know, when do you open up about it? Your parents aren't really asking you, like, hey, if you've ever been touched, let me know. It just wasn't the thing we talked about.
Yeah.
So I think it's been an incredible journey, because I look at my life before I was 30 and after 30. Because I never had peace inside before I was 30, and now I cultivate it every day.
And it was because you understood that moment in your life, and you came out and you could talk about it and start to process it.
I think it was that moment and every moment, because there was a lot of things I was holding on to. I wasn't forgiving a lot of people. I was angry about a lot of people from my past. I did everything to prove people wrong. Right. I was driven.
Which got you a long way.
Anger is the second most powerful fuel in the world, I think. Because I would sacrifice my body, I would sacrifice sleep, anything to prove people wrong. And yet it was never enough. Right. It never made me feel good inside. Maybe for a moment, I felt like, yes, I proved them wrong. And then I'd always be angry afterwards. I was like, I still need a bigger goal to reach. I need more money. I need bigger accomplishments. It was never enough to make me feel fulfilled. Right. And that's what I started to learn about after I forgave and healed everything from my past, of all the people that I felt took advantage of me or hurt me or said something or whatever it may be. Whether it was accurate or not, I just said I'm forgiving everyone. I wrote everyone letters. I didn't send them to them, but I just wrote them letters. I journaled. I did ceremonies. I would burn the letters. I would bury them to start something new. I was doing my own spiritual ayahuasca, experiences to really process and grieve. And then the most important person I had to forgive was myself. I would beat myself up over and over again, constantly.
About that situation when you were 5, or just everything?
Everything. That I'm stupid, that I'm not enough, that I'm horrible, I didn't accept myself, I wish I were dead, constantly. I would say that all the time, I wish I were dead. I wish I were dead.
You said that when you were a kid, right?
A kid, all the time.
7, 8 years old.
All the time.
Saying that to the principal, I wish I was dead.
That's it. And I just feel like, I don't know. I felt like once I started to process it all and heal it all, then I could have peace.
Okay.
And that was key.
Have there been bumps along the way in that integration process? Or has it been...
No, I'm a perfect human being.
But it's been mostly positive.
It's been mostly positive.
We're able to get up and say that.
It's been mostly positive. I mean, listen, I think relationships are our greatest teacher. And, you know, I still go through experiences with family and friends and intimate partners where I get triggered.
Yeah.
But I'm much more aware of everything that I do. And I'm quicker to acknowledge the mistakes I make and take full ownership for everything that I do. I just say, you're right. It's my bad. I made a mistake. I apologize. You know, let's move forward.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you talking about this. And
Yeah.
I know you just dropped a podcast like today where
Yeah.
you go like you to the microphone for like under an hour, just about an hour, talking about all this.
Yeah.
Because until I started digging into you, I didn't know. You know, I
Yeah.
knew I've watched all your, many of your shows, if not all, but I didn't know this detail about you because there's a lot of other stuff to focus on. You know,
of
pro
stuff.
athlete and all these other things, and you're on Ellen and you're doing the Facebook show. But I was like, whoa. And I appreciate you talking about
Yeah,
it
of
because
course.
again, this kind of and let's be honest about the image. I mean, you do have a certain image of this all-American guy, successful former athlete, and when you can talk about it, it opens the doors up a lot to a lot of other men and women around the world. And I know this for a reason. So last year, guy came on my show, John Joseph, right? Former lead singer of the hardcore punk band, the Cro-Mags, right? Doesn't get more kind of alpha than that, whatever that means, right? 10-time Ironman finisher, right? Also former Hare Krishna monk from the streets of New York, like really lived on the streets,
Yeah.
right? And so he challenges me to do an Ironman race, and in the process of training for that in New York City, a lot of my past comes out. And it was really helpful that John had spoken openly about his own sexual abuse when he was in foster care as a kid. And he wrote this book called The Diary of a Cro-Magnon in 2006. And he said, Brian, he said, I must have wrote this chapter over and over, 6 months in a row, crying.
Crazy.
Again, hard, street New York guy having to talk about the stuff that, you know, that he had to talk about, some of the stuff you talked about. And that was really hard for him. And just open up about that was a really big deal. And so for me, having John being able to talk about that stuff, it helped me talk about it. So there's a point in the movie where we're at New York City, my crew, we're at this Airbnb, I'm in the bedroom crying, John's about to come over, and we know this is the time where I'm gonna tell John all about this.
Wow.
My crew doesn't know about this. They saw me the day before on a bike test, sweating, which turned into tears on this bike. And they're like, what the fuck's happened? But I've never seen you cry, Brian. They've been with me for 6 years. And I had all these bad memories of New York City, because New York City is where I failed. It's where I threw everything away. It's where I overdosed. It's where all my dreams, everything went to shit. I let all my friends down. My girlfriend left me 4 years. My best buddy from MIT fired me, never talked to me again. All these triggers, and I'm just getting triggered.
Oh, man.
I hated going back there. I didn't even want to go back. And I think John knew that. He's like, why don't you come to New York? So I sit on the sofa with him, and it's two guys talking about their traumas. And
Wow.
if John hadn't have talked about the sexual abuse, I don't know if I would have told him about it. Now, of course, there's cameras watching, and now, you know, millions of people know, but it was really helpful. And again,
Absolutely, man.
I had some of the same reaction. So we have the footage in the can, we come back, and we're like, all right, what do we do with it? We decide to do a weekly series about me training it, and they're like, what do we do? Do we just say it's an addiction? And then I'm just like, guys, we have to come all out. And then I remember my wife, you know, I actually brought the crew over to her, and I had to tell her. Of course, I film her while I'm telling her. She's still mad about that, but I said, "Look, babe,"
'Cause she didn't know.
She didn't know, and I was 16 years. It was inside because, like, it's
Wow.
a shameful thing, you know. Heroin is the street drug, not this MIT graduate banker guy, and not this together guy. Again, what's it going to do for my business and London Real and everything? And then I remember I went to the studio Saturday night, and I wrote this 4-page email about it. Title, My Heroin Overdose, and just like came out, and of course we were dropping the episode the next day.
Wow.
But again, same thing you said, and I preach vulnerability. I talk about it. All my great guests on London Real, you love them because they're vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? And I appreciate you being vulnerable right out. It's almost a hallmark of our show. And yet, for me, it's hard. Take your own medicine. But again, the emails I got, just like you said, like pages and pages and pages of people with, you know, opiate addictions, problems, friends, fathers, successful people, and it's opened up so much stuff. And now I almost lead with it. I'm now so comfortable talking about it. Sometimes I make my guests uncomfortable before the show. I'll be like, I did a movie last year about my Ironman race and my heroin overdose. And they're like, what?
I'm right there with you, though. This is my life. So,
right.
Yeah.
So now you're with me. But it's really empowering you know,
Yeah.
to talk about. So I appreciate you talking
course.
about it. Your book, Mask of Masculinity, I guess it was kind of born out of a lot of this stuff.
It was.
Okay.
I felt like when I talked about it on my podcast, and it's the second most visited link on my site still today, that podcast, that episode. And I got the response from so many men who said, I've been married for 30 years with 5 kids, no one knows. My wife doesn't know, my kids don't know. This is what happened to me when I was 7, when I was 11. So men just opened up to me. And I was just like, I was on an emotional, I don't know, it was just hangover for weeks because of the letters I was getting. I'm not a trained therapist. I don't know what to say to people. All I can say is what's worked for me and what I went through. So I felt the weight of the world from all these men who were brave enough to just email me, let alone all the men who didn't say anything, but maybe felt pain and didn't know how to communicate it. And that's when I felt like, okay, what I do next needs to be for humanity at the biggest level. It's not gonna be sexy, it's not gonna make me money, it's not gonna be the popular thing. Everyone told me not to do it, but I said, this is something that I need to do for me and to serve men. And the women who are with men who maybe might be guarded all the time, or might get angry, or might feel like they never open up. How do you get through to the men like that? Yeah. How can we understand the men in their lives? Our fathers, our brothers, our uncles, our husbands, the women who are with them. And I just felt like it was a duty of mine. And then, so for the next year and a half, I was like, I'm not gonna make money around this thing, but it's gonna bring me the most enjoyment and fulfillment ever. And if I can serve 1,000 people, 10,000, 50,000 people in a deep, meaningful way, then it's worth it for me. And so everything stemmed from that space of trying to continue to share my story, share other people's stories in the book, and give men tools to kind of break free, to be more vulnerable, and give women tools to understand the men in their lives better.
Yeah. Big conversation these days about masculinity.
Oh man, it's crazy.
Let's talk about that a bit.
It's crazy.
I mean, we both had guests on. I've had Jordan Peterson on, so have you have. I had Elliot Hulse on recently, who's gone really big into the masculinity thing. Mm-hmm. I had Rose McGowan here a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
She talked about
great.
Everything, the Me Too movement. And I asked her about collateral damage with the Me Too movement. I had Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of my first guys on this show, big guys at the time, 5 years ago. He's in my TED Talk. And I was telling her, I'm like, it feels like there's collateral damage here because his Cosmos 2 show was put on hold. And
Really?
I didn't know the details, but when I looked at it, it looked thin. And I was just like, okay, Rose, what about that stuff? And I felt like I had to ask her. And she said, you're right, Brian. She's like, that's not okay, the collateral damage. But she's like, I had to talk about this stuff and talk about my feelings. And so you just see a lot of people these days talking about male, female, good, bad. Mm-hmm. How do you jump into that discussion, or how should we look at that discussion, because it's very emotional as well?
Yeah, it's very emotional. I think it's tough too for a lot of people, and even for me, like, I'm a very loving guy. I feel like I'm very nice to everyone. But even when
Except on the basketball court.
Exactly, but that was the old me. But even when I wrote that book and came out with it, there was like women who were like, yeah, but you hugged me too long, and I'm like, well, I don't know, don't hug me when you come up to hug me. It's like, and then they try to post, if they get upset about you, they just want to say whatever they want to say. And people can say anything, and it looks like it's true, but there's no proof. So that's the thing that's challenging. There's some men out there, nothing's happened to me, but I mean, there's some men out there where there's a lot of allegations, but it's like, well, maybe that woman was just upset with you, didn't like what you did or didn't do, and they're going to say something. Yeah, and it can kind of smear them without any proof of it actually happening, and maybe it didn't happen. I'm not saying it did either way, but
it's like the court of public opinion as opposed to the court of law.
It's really tough.
It's tricky.
And so I think that's the collateral damage, that like a lot of people can just say what they want and people judge and trust it really quickly without actually knowing what's true. So I think it's just messy. And I talked about this last night at a speech I was giving, where we got to get back to just being human beings and just understanding that we're all human and sometimes things aren't perfect. Yes, there are boundaries and those should never be crossed. But I don't know, it's just like, there's some silly stuff, like, I don't know.
It's like, I think it all has to be like a nuanced conversation. And
it is.
I know, Jack Dorsey's been making the rounds lately, and overall Twitter is a beautiful thing, but it also is horrible because it sets everything down to a soundbite and an image and a meme. And you can't understand someone like that. And, even Rose McGowan, I mean, you got to spend an hour and a half with her and you understand what she's about. You're like, okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's easy to see her as the short-haired woman that just wants to kill everybody.
Exactly.
And it is all about a nuanced, long-form conversation to understand who we are as humans.
Yeah, and there's like, there's also like the double stigma too. Like I interviewed a very influential, powerful, famous older woman one time. I'm not going to mention who, because for me it wasn't a big deal. But right when she walked in, she's a big TV personality, like people would know her name. Right when she walked in, she goes, "Wow, you are beautiful, you are stunning." She's like, "I like them tall and hung." Like she was saying things that I was like, this is funny to me, right? This is like, okay, no big deal, whatever. She's friendly. But if the things was reversed, if a man said that to a woman, and she didn't stop, she went on and on for the next hour, very flirtatious, very, would make someone feel very uncomfortable if they weren't confident with who they were. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is fine. Like, I don't really care because it's harmless. But if I was saying this to a woman right now, it would be spread around the world as like I'm the most horrible man ever for just saying something. And that's what's tough. There's like a double stigma, so.
Yeah, and your career would be over.
Over for like 5-10 years, right? Unless I did something to come back. So I think it's challenging because you have to be so sensitive and careful. And I'm very careful about what I say because everything's recorded. I'm very careful about the questions I ask, my responses, because that's the time we're in. I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's also good to make sure that people are held accountable, and that's what is important. But I think at some point we got to get back to being human beings.
Yeah.
What
about then social justice and the Twitter wars and the mania? Like, what do people do about that? I mean, you're on these mediums. I am too. We're publishing content. Okay, we're publishing longer form content, but still, like, what do you do to not be a part of that, or how do we address that?
It's tough because it seems like the world is judging people sometimes on one thing that's happened as opposed to their career work. From one thing that you said and then discounting everything you've done in the last 6-7 years of the show if you messed up, right? It's like, and that's what's challenging. I've tried to distance myself from social media by allowing my team to have a criteria to post things everywhere for me, just so I'm not going to react ever or slip up in any way. It's like, let me step back and allow my team to have a structure and a format, which maybe is less personal. I'm still like responding to comments, whatever, but I'm just not posting.
Right, but we don't want the vanilla version of Lewis or me or anyone.
Exactly.
But I mean,
I think right now you've got to be a little vanilla. I think unless you're Jordan Peterson, he can get away with it or something, or gosh, what's his name? Ben Shapiro. It's like Joe Rogan. I feel like these guys they've been this way the whole time.
True.
And so I don't know. It's like Donald Trump. He can kind of get away with like anything he says, in a sense. But it's like they've been this way. This is who they are. But if I'm coming from a place of positivity and inspiration, and I say one thing off, then my whole work is criticized.
But this is kind of the new normal. And so,
it's crazy, man.
It used to be court of law and things had to be proven. Now that doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, even with Neverland, Leaving Neverland, did you see this documentary?
Yeah. What did you think of that? Because, all right.
This is crazy, man.
Because,
This is crazy. Okay. So I watched this last week. This is why I redid this episode of my show talking about my whole journey.
Was it hard to watch or decide to watch?
It was so hard to watch. I mean, it was beautifully shot. So I was admiring the work and the storytelling.
I haven't watched it yet.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the storytelling, it's beautifully shot. It's 4 hours long, but I could have watched another 4 hours. There are two men who were allegedly sexually abused for many, many years by Michael Jackson. I believe them fully because everything they were saying, you can't make that stuff up about the feelings you had, the emotions, how you felt during this time. I was just nodding my head. Every time they were talking, I was like, wow, that's how I felt. So I just believe them based on, there's proof that they were sleeping in Michael Jackson's bed for many nights, for many years. And all the things they said after that, I was just like, wow, you can't just make that up. So it was really sad. It's very sad for me because I'm a big fan of Michael Jackson.
Right, of course.
But now I'm just like, this really sucks.
Okay.
Really sucks because these kids were, here's the thing, in the documentary, both the kids were like, well, they said that Michael Jackson and these boys, that God brought them together and this is how we show our love together. This is how we express our love for each other. So it's never like Michael Jackson forced them to do anything. It's not like he was slamming them up against walls or whatever. It was a manipulation. And when you're a 7-year-old and God is telling you this is how we show our love for each other, and God, who's Michael Jackson, is giving you attention. It's really sad to know that that was happening for many, many years for lots of kids. So I'm just sad by it.
Okay.
Really sad.
All right. Made you angry too.
Maybe angry because there's so many boys that are facing this and they don't know how to talk about it. Lots of boys. And these are 25, 35-year-old men now talking about it.
Right.
And how it's affected every decision of their life. Their relationships, their careers, everything has been affected because one man decided to sexually abuse them. And I looked at myself and said, wow, my whole life was shaped by these feelings, these emotions, by this action that happened. I didn't have control. I'm now able to process it and take full ownership and responsibility for my emotions and my feelings now. And I'm actually grateful that it happened to me because I feel a deep sense of love and compassion for people. And I feel a deep sense of wanting to inspire and impact humanity in the biggest ways possible. And that brings me the most fulfillment. So I don't think I would be this person without that experience. And I'm
grateful for it.
I'm so grateful
Wow.
that I was sexually abused because I feel like it gives me a superpower of caring and a desire to lift humanity up and make sure that this stuff doesn't happen to people, or if it does, to support them in healing faster. Otherwise, I don't know what I'd be doing. It gives me a deeper mission and a purpose, and I'm grateful for those lessons. I don't wish it on anyone,
Right.
but I'm grateful.
Because you were in that less powerful position, and now you have empathy for anybody that was like that.
Absolutely.
And
For
also-
men and women, all people.
Right.
You know, I don't want it to happen to anyone.
Right.
I just can only relate to men who feel like they're unable to express themselves. And I think the statistic is 45 or 48% of men in America said that they don't have one male friend that they can open up to about everything. They might have a guy friend that they can go to the bar or watch a game with or have a beer with or whatever, but they don't have one male friend. Almost 50% of men say that they can't open up about everything in their life. For me, that's really sad.
Yeah.
So when I go and do speeches and talk and did talks about this, the rooms were usually 50-50 men and women. And I'd ask the men of the room, raise your hand if, once a month you talk to your guy friends about your emotional challenges, your marriage challenges, your insecurities, your fears. Maybe like one or two guys would raise their hands. And I'd say, are you guys in a church group that it's like scheduled and forced and like given to you guys? And they're like, yes. Most of them were like, in a church group where you meet with a group of men once a month to start to talk, like a Bible study. And I say, for the ladies in the room, raise your hand if you do this every single day. You have lunch with a girlfriend, a group of girls, you talk about your marriage challenges, your body issues, challenges, your insecurities. Almost everyone raises their hand for every day or every week, that they have girlfriends that they can talk to.
Right.
So it's just not as accessible and acceptable for men. I'm not saying men do this, but I think less men are willing to open up. And that, for me, I just want men to know that they're allowed to open up and find a safe place that they can do that for anything going on.
How can we get more men to do this? And is it about identifying some of those masks to see which mask you're wearing? Or how do we do that?
I think I think most of us men just don't want to address that there's anything wrong with us.
Right.
I thought I was perfect. I had such a big ego. I was just like, this is just who I am. Don't try to change me. It's
Right.
working.
Well, we're taught we're aggressive, we're independent.
Exactly.
I mean, look at the Hollywood movies,
Absolutely.
Rambo,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Well, and also look at the results I was getting. I was two-sport All-American. I was a professional athlete, world record holder. I was making millions of dollars. I was with beautiful women. Look at my results. My results speak for themselves, right? Everything is based on results. So I was like, why do I need to change anything? Everything's working. Everything's getting better on the outside. But I was suffering and always alone on the inside. And so I think I just was unwilling to address my inner feelings, my inner emotions, because the anger was fueling me to drive me to get these results. The second most powerful fuel in the world. The most powerful is inner peace.